Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished leader, a fellow member of the YPO from France, Mr. Peter Johnson. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here today.
Thank you. Peter is a strategic foresight advisor and the founder of the Ayadee Foundation. He's a diplomat turned futurist and technologist. He's an educator, advisor, and a global connector. And as I mentioned, he's a fellow member of the YPO. So, Peter, before we talk about strategy, tell me about
Mhm.
your journey. You started your career in finance
Yeah.
and diplomacy. What inspired you to shift towards futurism and blockchain?
Well, it's been connected in some ways. It's been a learning journey of continuous learning and adaptation, trying to understand and to shape the systems. So again, starting my career at Standard and Poor's, making analytical models and really going into coding even to make these cash flow waterfalls,
Mm,
that gave me a framework and a structure to start with and to really think about risk assessments in a concrete, quantitative way. And as I adjusted more towards diplomacy and other areas where I was looking at the soft power side and other factors,
mm,
that was really helpful to be able to tie these together, the quantitative and the more qualitative aspects.
mm,
And so futurism was a natural evolution of this journey.
mm,
In diplomatic work, I could see how traditional systems and institutions were struggling to keep pace with rapid change.
mhm.
And this combined with also new tools I've been developing in the blockchain space were interconnected ways to find new tools to meet these challenges and new ways to react and create new
Fascinating.
structures.
Fascinating. And how did your experiences as a US diplomat shape your understanding of global challenges and technological solutions?
Well, it was quite a formative experience.
Hmm.
And I served in places that were very different than each other. Egypt and Germany, for example, working on issues ranging from political instability to counterterrorism. And that gave me an appreciation of the multifaceted aspect of these problems, of these very interconnected problems that require a holistic systems level approach. And again, it showed me the limitations of traditional top down systems that we've been using and how we really had to have interconnected systems with different experts, people with different academic backgrounds collaborating together
Mm,
and finding ways to work together. And again, that's where a lot of these new tools with blockchain come into using this, the systems
mm,
approach to futurism, find ways we can bring experts from across dimensions and across different spaces together to find new solutions.
amazing. And can you share the story behind the founding of the Ayadee Foundation and what Ayadee means to you?
Yeah. The Ayadee Foundation was born out of the desire to bridge the gap between the worlds of technology and sustainable development. During my time as a diplomat, I was struck by the disconnect between innovative solutions being developed in the tech world
Hmm.
and the pressing needs for communities on the ground. I saw an opportunity to create a platform that could connect these worlds together.
Hmm.
And the name Ayadi is deeply personal. It reflects the foundation's core mission. It's a transliteration of the Arabic word for hands.
Hmm.
So this symbolizes our commitment to a hands-on collaborative approach to problem solving. And it also represents the idea of empowerment,
Mm,
giving people the tools and the resources they need to shape their own futures. We've had several iterations, for example, of our hackathon, also of the Addy Foundation fellowships, where we train young professionals
mm,
to use modern technology and connect them with YPO members and also members of other networks like the BMW Foundation Responsible Leaders Network. So these young rising leaders get exposed to both the tech and the policy and the leadership aspects as we
mm,
train them for the next level and the next stage of
mm,
creating solutions in a hands-on method.
amazing. Well, maybe one day I'm going to have another conversation purely on the Ayadee Foundation with
Oh,
you.
would love that.
But today, Peter, let's talk only about your role as your avatar as a strategic foresight advisor.
Mhm.
How do you
Yes.
define strategic foresight and how does it differ from conventional strategic planning?
This is a very important question. This is where there's often confusion.
Mm,
So, strategic foresight is the discipline of exploring, anticipating, and shaping the future.
mhm,
The reason it goes beyond traditional strategic planning is normal strategic planning. We think about forecasting and we say, I expect X will happen. Like
mm,
maybe I say, I'm 80% certain this is the scenario that will happen. And we make our cash flow models based on this scenario. In this case, we're embracing the uncertainty and we explore multiple plausible scenarios.
mm,
So we don't think about a single linear projection of the future. but rather we scan the horizon for all the emerging trends, the weak signals, we call those,
Hmm.
and the wild cards. And then we develop a range of alternative scenarios. And we use these scenarios to stress test those strategies and to
Hmm.
identify what are the new opportunities for innovation.
Hmm.
The key difference is the mindset. Conventional strategic planning is more about optimizing for the future,
Hmm.
whereas strategic foresight is about building resilience and adaptability for an unknown future,
Hmm. Hmm.
going from reactive to a proactive stance. So
Hmm.
instead of being the passive observer who's saying, based on current trends, I foresee this will happen, or my forecast is this will happen, we say, no, here's the range of possibilities that could happen. And now let's take action. What can we do to make the future that's desirable for us, for our
Hmm.
organization,
Hmm.
the path that we go down?
Hmm. And could you give me an example of the difference between foresight and planning?
Yeah. One example could be Chevron. Years ago, we're going back to the oil crisis now with this
Hmm.
one. Chevron had created a whole variety of scenarios, whereas the other oil companies were just saying, hey, we predict oil prices will do this. Here's our forecast for the oil markets and what demand will look like. Chevron already back in the 70s was an early leader, one of the first developers really of strategic foresight.
Hmm.
And within that space, they had developed so many different scenarios and so many different models that when the oil crisis hit, or shock of the early 70s took place, they were ready for it. They
Hmm.
didn't say, we know this is definitely going to happen. They didn't envision the issues with Iran and what would happen with oil prices as the only scenario. And they didn't say this will definitely happen,
Hmm.
but they had prepared a variety of scenarios. So when that what if happened of an oil price shock, they were ready for it. And they
Hmm.
had a plan. They had many different plans. And they could say, okay, this is the problem that's happening.
Yeah.
We have a plan for that. Here's our strategy. And while all the other oil majors really suffered in the 1970s during
Hmm.
when that 73 crisis took place,
Hmm.
it, Chevron actually came out of the crisis better.
Hmm. Amazing. Thank you.
Mhm.
What is scenario analysis? If you can help me understand this for my viewers and listeners who are all very, very young, and how can
Yeah.
leaders use scenarios to stress test today's strategies?
Well, it's the core methodology we use in strategic foresight. So again, glad you asked about it. It's a very structured process to think about a range of plausible future environments.
Mm.
So again, instead of trying to think of what's that one most likely future scenario, we think of that range of possibilities, that range of outcomes, and then we take our current strategy and run it through each of these scenarios.
Mm.
And we may find that, hey, my current strategy works in three of these scenarios, but in these other two, actually, maybe it doesn't.
Mm.
What do I need to do to strengthen my strategy or to make it more resilient so it
Mm.
can be making it through all of these scenarios?
Mm.
And again, we'll be still weighing which is more or less and more likely and less likely, but we look at all the plausible scenarios and make sure that our strategy could fit within all of those.
Mm. Great response. Peter,
Thank you.
many firms also run only one best guess format or forecast. What
Yeah,
risks arise when a single future-minded mindset prevails?
it's a very fragile way of doing things.
Hmm.
In this scenario, you might have strategic blind spots. That single mindset of the future will
Hmm.
cause you to overlook emerging threats
Hmm.
and emerging opportunities as well.
Hmm.
That lack of adaptability, when the future deviates from the forecast, you're not ready for what to do. Going back to
Yeah.
the Chevron example,
Hmm.
Chevron was ready for all these different scenarios.
Hmm.
The other oil majors were not. And so maybe they had still two or three scenarios. Maybe it wasn't so narrow, it was only one vision, but they weren't as well prepared. And so far as missing innovation opportunities, the best example I can think of is Kodak.
Hmm.
That's from my hometown. I grew up in Rochester, New York, where Kodak
Hmm.
is still based.
Yeah.
Kodak, of course, developed the digital camera first
Yeah.
and put it on the shelf. Who would want a digital camera? Film cameras are better.
Hmm.
Obviously, two or three bankruptcies for Kodak later, that didn't work out so well.
Hmm.
So making sure you consider all the range of possibilities, not just one single future, is really
Hmm.
important in this volatile world.
Hmm. Well said. How
Thank
can
you.
wildcard events be incorporated into foresight work without paralyzing decision making?
Well, instead of trying to only predict the next wild card, the idea is to build the organizational resilience and the agility so you can respond effectively to any unexpected event. One practical technique is to challenge assumptions
Mm,
and to stimulate creative thinking by asking what if questions
mm,
about seemingly improbable events. Because again, we can't think of every wild card, but let's say with a group of people from our team or even outsiders, we think of 5 or 10 wild card events, things that might seem really crazy, but we
yeah.
discuss, but what would happen if this did happen?
Mm,
Let's say we have a list of 10 of these and something else happens. Number 11 happens instead of one of those 10. Because we've made our company or organization so resilient to these 10 maybe relatively crazy or less likely what if events, there's good odds that event number 11 or event number 12 we're also resilient enough to deal with them because we've widened our mindset and our ability to be resilient so much so that these events are things we can consider as well.
mm, amazing. And are there any indicators that could reveal that an organization's strategic time horizon is too short?
Indeed, yes, there are. One is painfully too frequently used today, especially I feel in North America, a focus on short-term metrics.
Mm,
If you're primarily thinking about quarterly earnings and other short-term financial metrics, like most public companies in North America are, yeah, you're going to be neglecting the long-term investments in innovation.
mm,
PE-owned companies or just privately owned companies in general have that advantage, perhaps, of being able to think more long-term, since
mm,
they don't have that quarterly result to think back and react to. Also, a reactive firefighting culture,
mhm.
if you're constantly in reaction mode, you're not shaping the future. You're just reacting. You're lurching
Yeah.
from one crisis to the next.
Mm,
Whereas if you're anticipating, you're ready when a crisis happens, and you're designing the long-term future of your company. The other three main points: a lack of investment in R&D and innovation.
mhm.
Again, if you're saying, hey, we've got the best product, it's always going to be the best. Not too long from now, you're not going to be the best anymore because somebody
Mm,
will develop something better, right? And a high degree of strategic surprise,
mm,
if you're consistently being blindsided by market shifts and competitive threats, it's a sign you are not scanning the future. You are not scanning the horizon for emerging trends and weak signals.
mm,
You need to have your team know how to do that. Finally, a homogenous leadership team. Again, if there's a lack of diversity in your leadership team, this can lead to a very narrow and short-sighted view of the future. So
mm.
in this case, I'm not saying diversity only for diversity's sake and for fairness and for equity. I'm saying it simply because you're not going to have a broad array of
Yeah.
ideas. And if you have people who went to the same schools, who have the same education, who are from the same region, it can be fantastic to have a team of Harvard MBAs who started their career at Goldman Sachs. Great,
Mhm.
brilliant people. But they all might have the same training, the same mindset, the same way they do things.
Yeah.
It's far more effective to have that more heterogeneous group where you
Mm,
have different perspectives that challenge each other and see different things that the others might not observe.
amazing. What role does systems thinking play in understanding complex supply chain futures?
Oh, that's a very important one. I mean, obviously, today's supply chains have such great degrees of complexity, and they are such complex systems.
Mm,
Yeah, traditional linear approaches to supply chain management just are no longer adequate.
mm,
With this interconnected global networks we face, if there's a disruption in one part of the system, the effects can have a massive cascade throughout the entire chain. So when we have systems thinking, we have the framework to understand the underlying structures, to understand the dynamics of these complex systems. We can see how the different parts are interconnected. We
mm,
can identify the right feedback loops and the unintended consequences, and we can develop more holistic and resilient strategies.
mm,
So with this systems view, we can move beyond simply optimizing individual components of the supply chain and become more adaptive and sustainable in how we run our
mm,
systems.
mm.
And really, that systems view will allow us to, by knowing these different interconnected parts, to
Yeah.
be more prepared. If there's a crisis in one part, we already know who our backup plan is. And we
Mm,
know if we see something happening, what cascading effects might be coming in a week or two or three if we don't take
true.
action now.
True. Great response. And
Thank you.
what, in your view, constitutes a weak signal in market or societal trends? And why should organizations pay attention to such early cues?
A weak signal is something subtle, an early indicator of a potential future trend or disruption. It's often ambiguous, it's fragmented, it's difficult to interpret, but it can provide an early, valuable warning
Mm,
significant change on the horizon.
mm,
Now, what these are and how to look for them, yeah, that's the area that's where people face challenges and difficulties.
mm,
But by the time it's in the mainstream press, it's not a signal anymore.
Mm,
Right? If we're reading about it as a headline at the top of a major global paper, it might already be a trend.
mm,
It's already something having a bigger impact.
mm,
So we're going to talk to experts in our industry.
mm,
We're going to maybe read different types of journals, maybe look at scientific journals, maybe look at demographic trends, maybe looking at what's going on different if we see any outliers in our sales and our revenue for our companies and trying to investigate why that's happening.
mm.
Even looking at pages like Reddit and seeing what are the weird threads, what are the unusual
Yeah,
things coming up,
yeah.
even creating a chat GPT tool just to say, hey, find me all the signals in my industry coming up.
Mm,
Examples of this, yeah, back in, if we were in 2009 and we said, hey, there's this weird thing called Bitcoin starting to be
mm,
used, even 2012, 2013, when it was far from the mainstream still, these would have been examples of looking at what is a signal. We didn't know it was going to become big yet then,
mm,
but we could have started thinking of like, what would happen if this became big? How would
mm,
this disrupt traditional payments and banking and
mm,
currency? And so these are things we start looking at right now. There's so many things like, for example, in the biotech space of the different tools that are used with, say, RNA vaccines and things like that.
yeah.
Maybe that's already beyond being a signal, though, as we've used it with the COVID vaccines already.
Mm,
But they're really just seeing what are the early things happening, and it doesn't only have to be in technology.
yeah.
Maybe we see a change in birth rates or change
Mm,
in marriage trends,
yeah.
a change in rates of children still living at home into adulthood versus moving out. Yeah,
Mm,
like how do these things change? What are people's buying patterns?
mm,
Are people feeling more isolated, which especially in North America, I've
yeah.
seen is becoming a huge problem. People
Mm,
feeling more isolated, having less close friends in adulthood, less social clubs, less interaction. Things like that could lead to a change in how democracy works, how
mm,
buying patterns work, how
mm.
people influence each other.
Very interesting.
So it can be definitely social,
Yeah,
economic, political, science, technology. There's a variety of areas we can look at.
yeah. Your examples help us to understand the topic so much more easily. Moving on, which practical techniques help teams to detect and monitor weak signals before they become mainstream trends?
We have four main areas for this.
Hmm.
The first is horizon scanning. This is just systematically scanning a wide range of information from
Mm,
academic journals to patent filings to social media to even science fiction
mm,
to look for ideas for new developments.
mm,
And again, you can automate this. This is something, okay, I could just have ChatGPT do this, give me an alert every day. Maybe it won't do it perfectly, but that can give you a general idea,
mm,
especially if I have very specific prompts telling whichever AI tool what to look for me.
mm,
The next would be trend scouting. This is actively seeking out and engaging with innovators, actually going and talking to people, innovators, entrepreneurs, scientific researchers, other edge communities to try to
mm,
gain emerging insights and early insights into these new trends. Sense making workshops. This is a relatively new concept, the sense making workshops, but these are structured workshops where teams can come together and they share and interpret their weak signals.
mm,
So, this is something I do with my classes. We start building up weak signals. I've got a whole database of them that I share, and they come together and they talk about them and see what makes sense. Which of these weak signals or potential weak signals do they think will
mm,
actually make an impact? And what would happen if they were to extrapolate what it looks like 10 years from now?
mm,
And then again, the last thing, the AI powered trend radars. This is again, well, it's kind of a repeat of the horizon scanning. It's
mhm.
just having the AI powered horizon scanning,
Yeah,
having AI tools do it for you in addition to what you're looking at
mhm.
yourself.
Well said.
Thank you.
What governance structures help organizations act on foresight insights instead of letting reports gather dust?
This is a critical question because all too often foresight reports end up gathering dust exactly as you said. There's
Yeah.
no clear process of how to translate those insights into action.
Mm,
So to avoid this, organizations need to embed foresight into their core governance, into the decision-making processes.
mm,
Ideally, you could have everybody in the organization trained. You create a culture of curiosity, experimentation.
mm,
You teach everybody what are the basics of foresight. What are the basics, at least, of looking for signals and raising a hand and telling somebody if you see something unique or interesting. If I was leading a retail company, I'd want my sales clerks, my cashiers to know the basics
mm.
because maybe there's something they observe being there in the store day to day, interacting
Yeah.
with customers that we're not going to capture in the numbers. So that culture of curiosity and experimentation, top to bottom in the organization, is one simple, clear way. Having a formal process to link strategy and
mm,
foresight together, yeah, this can be clear. Having standard operating procedures that everybody knows. Hey, if you have
mm,
an idea, if you see something, here's how you get to the strategy team. Here's how we put it into our implementation.
mm,
Here's how we go beyond the amazing foresight report that a consultant wrote for us to actually putting that into our tactical plan for the next
mm,
year.
mm.
Again, foresight's looking at maybe a 10-year plus horizon,
Yeah.
but we can look backwards now of, okay, well, how do we get to that 10-year plus horizon? What are the steps we can take today to get to that?
Mm, mm,
We have a network of foresight champions across the organization, people who've maybe had a little more detailed training in this. They
mm.
could be management and leadership, but they could also be individuals who are specialists in their sector, in their
Yeah.
area. But
Mm,
either way, they're throughout the organization. So people are, if they know, hey, I've got this thing that I think could be significant.
mm,
It's not there's a separate foresight office back at headquarters only they can ask about.
mm.
That within every team, there's somebody they can go to as that first stage to
Yeah.
bring up, hey, is this important? What do you think? How would we approach this?
Mm,
And finally, of course, there can be that dedicated unit back at headquarters and that dedicated team that has more detailed expertise and resources where all this information can funnel back to and back and forth between that team and between operations teams.
mm. Very interesting. And what, in
Mhm.
your view, are the core skills every foresight practitioner should cultivate beyond technical tools?
That is very important. I would start with curiosity. Just what, pardon me, just always wanting to learn, always wanting to know more.
Mm,
And related to that, humility, being aware that you don't know everything, right?
mm, mm.
If you're the expert, people are coming to saying, hey, tell me about the future of the organization. It's
Yeah.
very easy to be too arrogant about it.
Yeah.
But realizing, hey, I know some futurist methodologies, I have some techniques, but I don't know your industry. I don't know your industry. I don't know your industry. And I can humbly approach with my techniques and my ideas,
Mm,
and I can guide you through your expertise,
mm,
but ultimately being having that humility to know that you're not the expert in everything.
mm,
The empathy to be able to understand and appreciate different perspectives, creativity, again, thinking outside the box. The techniques and methods we use in Foresight are helpful for this to create a
mm,
structured way to build creativity when people are stuck on ideas.
mm,
But this is, again, creating new possibilities, imagining things that maybe people will say are impossible, but we say, hey, we're thinking about a 10-year horizon. It was 10 years from when Facebook launched to reaching 1 billion users. And
mm.
how much did the world change in those 10 years? Or in the 10 years before the fall of the Soviet Union, who could have forecast that
Yeah,
to have happened, such a massive change?
absolutely.
So one has to really be creative. And the last 2 points I'd say would be communication,
Hmm.
just be able to communicate these complex ideas in a clear and compelling way. So being a good storyteller to a degree,
Mm,
and collaboration. Because if you're working in foresight, or if you're working in a leadership role and using foresight tools, you have to be able to work across a broad variety of backgrounds and
mm,
disciplines if you're going to have the depth and the breadth of ideas that you need to properly do this.
Great response. Peter, I have time
Okay.
for two more questions.
Mhm.
How do you ensure that ethical considerations remain central during futures discussions, especially involving emerging technologies?
Well, this is a very critical and often overlooked aspect of foresight work. We explore emerging technologies and essentially do so with a deep sense of ethical responsibility.
Mm,
At the Ayadee Foundation, we've been developing our own tech tools at the same time as leading these training programs. So we developed a framework for ethical foresight.
mm,
And
mm,
it's based on three core principles. Inclusivity is one. We really look at how future discussions should be inclusive and participatory.
mm,
So we reflect on the diversity of voices and perspectives in our society.
mm.
Again, it's going to be better results with more inclusive results in
Yeah.
that regard too.
Mm,
Precaution, we take a precautionary approach to the development and deployment of new tech, and that we consider the potential risks and unintended consequences of what we might develop.
mm,
And finally, stewardship, that we believe we have the responsibility to act as stewards of the future
mm,
and to ensure that the choices we make today will create a more just and sustainable and prosperous world for future generations.
Wow. And my last question for you, Peter. Could you give us an example or share a time when a foresight insight prompted a major strategic pivot in one of your ventures?
Yeah, that's something where we initially, with the Ayadee Foundation, had been working on digital ID tools for refugees and thinking of how these digital IDs could create transparency and help people when they, yeah, especially as refugees transferring, moving with their data, and how that can make an impact when they would go back home, etc. But we saw that the early indicators were that we can make a bigger impact in helping in most developing countries with digital technology that would help with supply chains. Half the economy in most developing countries is in agriculture, so we saw that statistic as one. We saw IBM Food Trust as a major company already creating something in that space. And at the same time, we saw IBM had created that sample of, okay, there's a few pilots starting there. They had done work both in China and the US, with Walmart in the US, with a major pork producer in China. But it wasn't yet at a large scale in 2017. It still today isn't yet at a big scale with blockchain, though it's becoming more widely adopted. And so that's where we pivoted from working with digital IDs for refugees into getting into the supply chain tracking space. Although even now, 8 years after we started in that space, it's still not widely used. I think this is coming to a point where the cascade will quickly turn upwards and become bigger, because this is something where we can have transparency. The tech already exists right now, that we can know where every product is in every warehouse. It could transparently be shared either publicly or privately to, say, regulators. And we could eliminate, or at least track the data to try to eliminate things like modern slavery. Or we could know if trees come from places where they're in violation of local forest protection laws and things like that. There's a lot we can do already with the data that exists. So I'd say that's the signal that brought us into that space back in 2017, and is cascading right now to the point where in a very short time, every object that you buy will be traceable. You won't necessarily need to know the tech of how it's traceable or why. Just like I don't know how to do everything on my phone. I can use it, but I don't know how it works in detail. And I can't build all my own apps. Well, now with AI, maybe I can. But I believe that that's something that again, for us, the signal was how supply chain tech was starting to go into the blockchain space. And I see that's something that's nearly hit its eclipse now at this point, of that cascade getting bigger and bigger, that we will soon see all of our goods being traceable.
Fascinating. And on that note, Peter, I just want to say what an amazing conversation this has been. Thank you for talking to me about your journey, but your incredible insights on strategic foresight has been truly something that I have learned, and I have shown my viewers and listeners will get many, many amazing pointers from you. Thank you again
so
for
much.
speaking to me, and good luck
today.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.